Andre DeQuisto. I'm the founder of Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands, Lone Wolf Custom Gear.
All right, well, we got Dan on the line.
And I started thinking, I probably shouldn't have shared those pictures.
All right, guys, we got Don Higgins on.
Anything that's got to do with chasing big deer, I've got my hands in it somehow. So.
Well, my name's John Eberhardt. The first one that comes to mind was early in my career.
I'm Scott Buckley from Iowa. I had jumped him in the summer too. He jumped up in that swamp grass down in the bottom lake.
And yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm chasing it. There ain't nothing stopping me.
Justin Hollinsworth. I'm with Whitetail Addictions and Lone Wolf Custom Gear.
So what are we talking about tonight?
We're talking about the one that got away.
They talked about a deer that you didn't get it done on for some reason. So go ahead and get into the story of the one that got away. Welcome to the Whitetail Legacy Podcast, coming in your ear holes, and a huge shout out if you're still listening to us in January here, late January. It's all the diehard deer hunters that are listening to us right now, and can't appreciate you guys enough for tuning into the show. We're going to keep the content pumping every week, even though it's out of season, and we got a damn good show for you guys this week. We're talking to Alex from the Deer Development. Guy had an absolute incredible year. Killed a Wisconsin buck, killed a Minnesota buck on a hanging hunt on public, then went North Dakota public and killed a buck, and his dad killed a buck out there. So he's going to break down the season for us. Absolute epic year. But before we do that, let's get into the people that make this possible. Let's start out with Exodus. This week, I want to cover their SP solar panel, SP18 solar panel. This is something that I'm going to throw into the arsenal next year. I'm going to hang some mobile cams into some spots that are really, really, really hard to get to. And I'm going to run this mobile cam. You could expect months of performance without changing batteries. So this is great for those really, really hard to reach spots, or maybe an out of state spot where you're not going to be able to get to, but you want that constant battery to be able to not have to worry about that camera malfunctioning at all. So the solar panels are really compact. They have a mount that goes right up on the tree, cable that hooks to your camera, and you are set after that. So I'm going to get a couple of these and try them out this year. Let's start off with the next one with Ride On Optics, guys. I was digging through there, and they have a thing called Ride On University. And there's a ton of videos on there, and it's covering a bunch of their products, how to set them up, how to sight them in, and then also just a lot of basic shooting and advanced shooting tactics to make yourself a better target shooter and a better hunter. I dug into there for a couple hours and didn't even touch the amount of videos that they have. A lot of good content in there. If you really like shooting or love gun hunting like we do, that's on their website at rideonoptics.com. And it's called the Ride-On University. Black Rifle Code. You can use code Whitetail Legacy, save you 20% off on Black Rifle Coffee. And Next Level, guys. These dudes from Next Level, they're really good friends of us, Scott and Nate, the owners. And one of them's son's having a lot of health issues right now, and he's in the hospital. So we just want to give a special shout out to them on this show. And if you guys are the praying type, add another prayer to the list for the Next Level guys. They're going through a lot with their kid right now. So just add it. If you're the praying type, add it to the list. And we really appreciate it. And like I said, we appreciate you guys being here. You can watch this on YouTube if you want to see me and Alex bounce back and forth, and actually probably be able to see some of the bucks that he's going to have on the film tonight. And you get to see my big ugly face on the other side. So, all right, let's stop beating around the bush and get right in. Here we go. All right, we got Alex Skelly on from the Deer Development. Man, how you doing tonight?
Man, I'm great. Thanks for having me on, by the way.
Yeah, I appreciate you working with us. We've been trying to line this up for a while. We were kind of joking there when we first started talking about, we were trying to line it up at the middle of the season, but then how your season went, it's kind of good we waited so you could tell the whole story. I'd have to have you on a second time to get the part two, and now we can just get it all in one rip.
Yeah, man, no doubt that it'll be no shortage of a story here. It was pretty productive.
Nice. All right, well, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
So my name's Alex Skelly. I'm actually a local real estate agent in Minnesota. I live in the South Metro, so it's Minneapolis and St. Paul. I live on the south end of the Twin Cities in the suburbs. And, I moved down here back in 2019. I grew up in northern Minnesota, actually, kind of cut my teeth on hunting the big woods up there. And it was a totally different ball game than, where I live at down here. It's more farm country and rolling hills and that sort of thing. So been living down here about little over 3 years now. And I tell you, my passion is chasing whitetails.
Nice. Yeah. And then you had an absolute incredible season. We're going to go over it, but killed 3 bucks. October 5th on your 6th set, October 26th on your 8th set, and then your 11th set, November 9th. I mean, man, that is badass, dude. You had shit pinned down. You have been messaging us about your first buck, the non-typical, the year prior, about how you were following him for the year, and this year he was throwing a bunch of cool shit, and we were kind of sharing some trail camera pictures. And the day I seen you had him, you messaged that you were down, I was like, man, that's badass. I love, you got the podcast, so you get to meet these people and talk to them that you never would have met otherwise, you know what I mean? And then you get to see them be successful. I absolutely love it when the shit goes together. So
yes, dude.
Let's just start off on that buck, number 6 set. I know you'd had a few sets before that on him, but go ahead and start off with that buck.
So that was a deer that I actually, where I'm located at. I think it'd be cool, honestly, if your listeners would probably find it pretty interesting how I got onto that farm in the first place, if you're into that. Kind of geographically how it lays out. I'm only like 30 minutes from the Wisconsin border, and Minnesota being a 1 buck state. And I usually, more like a majority of the time, I'll fill my tag come November in Minnesota. And I wanted more time to be able to hunt in the early season and potentially be able to fill 2 tags. And, the Wisconsin tags, it's only like $160 for a non-resident. So I decided once I moved down to the Twin Cities area, I was going to go across the river and hunt Wisconsin. And back in 2019, I mapped out, I think I pinned 20 spots on Onyx that I deemed to be worth door knocking. Like, I was looking to get into some private land, right? Dude, I went out there and I knocked on 20 doors that I had pinned that I map scouted already. I got 20 no's or nobody answered the door. So at that point, I went through all my pins and I was just looking on my map because I had gone so far into Wisconsin, right? And I pinned 2 more spots and I was like, well, I'm this far in there, I might as well go knock these and call it a day, right? Dude, I go and knock on the last door and this guy, and I'm not paying him anything. At this point, and I've duplicated this enough to where I can tell you that it works, man. I go knock on their door and I pitch it to him essentially like, hey man, I'm not looking for a handout here. If you have any physical labor, work around the farm, farmers are always busy doing stuff. If I can somehow, pay you in labor or helping you out one way or another in allowing me to hunt, I would appreciate it. And sure enough, man, the 22nd door I knocked on there, this guy let me into 1,100 acres. It's a dairy, dude. It's a dairy farm, and since then I got in there early 2019, and in the last 3 years, I've killed 3 big bucks on that farm, and but now backtrack. So I just kind of wanted to share that. I think that's pretty cool, man. And a lot of people are into the leasing and that sort of thing nowadays. Don't you boys lease some land, don't you?
Yeah, we got some permission and some lease. It's hard to get anybody. There's so many outfitters and shit and people that lease around here. It's hard to get permission on. And the one permission that we do have, it is a work permission. I take care of a migrating bird colony of purple martins in the summer. Yeah, and then we burn there's a prairie ground, and we burn 20 acres of prairie every other year. So the purple martin nest is actually a shitload of work, dude. If you don't know, yeah, like you got to go out there and eliminate the sparrows and the blackbirds and only save the purple martins. And it's like 75 nests. You got to go out there weekly and check them. And the purple martins have a certain egg, and you save those eggs, you get rid of the other eggs. And these birds migrate to Mexico, and then they'll come back to this place every year. And this colony like helps the population pretty much. So it's pretty cool, but it's a shitload of work going out there every weekend and pulling out bird eggs, out of these nests.
Yeah, of course.
But it's worth it to be able to hunt ground, man, whatever it takes.
Exactly. And comparing that, like, would you rather do some labor for the guy or pay thousands of dollars for a lease? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I've done my fair share of random things on that farm, but comparing what you'd pay for a lease price for 1,000 acres, it's not like I'm the exclusive hunter there. This family is it's like a Wisconsin heritage, dude. These guys, they get everybody and their brother together, and come the gun season, which is like Thanksgiving in Wisconsin, dude, they drive everything, and they have some pretty good success doing it. But as far as like, the whole early season, Wisconsin opens up like September 15th. And so like the 15th of September all the way till Thanksgiving, there's only like me and one other guy on this place hunting. So
nice.
It's pretty awesome. But anyways, so how this played out is I found this buck. I got him last year, and I think he was, in my opinion, he was a 3-year-old, and he was pretty identifiable. He had like super big white patches or like a round spot around his eyes. So I could clarify what this deer was. And last year it was like a big 7-pointer. And I believe he was, like I said, probably 3. And then this year, I don't know what happened to him, if he got, like a wound or something like that. And I got pictures of him in like June, and he was growing this big on his left pedicle, dude. He was growing this big goofy drop tine. It looked like a growth or something down the side of his head, because it was just super, it was thick, super mass, and like it's only probably 6 inches long. And then he grew a cluster of points going up in a big hanger that went up the other side, or that same non-typical side. So I started calling him Hanger, and he ended up having like 13 scoreable points, and his one side was completely typical. It was like a 5-point, and if it would have matched both sides, he would have been like mid 140s. So super solid buck. But anyways, I watched him throughout the summer, and after hunting this farm for like 3 years, and I have it pretty well figured out, and it's not bluffs. It's like it's rolling hill country of, they have a big crop rotation because all their food just goes to the cows. It's all fed to them. So the hills in their land it's probably 200 feet in elevation change. And anyways, watching this buck grow from like June, I had some cell cams out there and regular trail cams, and it's pretty easy to glass this property because you can get up on some of these hills and watch over, do the whole bottom and everything where they come out to feed at night. So I've been watching this deer, and like a week before season, I went out there, and this buck Hanger came out, and he was with a bachelor group of little or smaller deer and fed around out there. And I figured it would be a pretty, like, I knew based upon where he came out, I was pretty confident where he was bedding at. Ended up going in there on opener, and I didn't push real deep. And I think that was kind of I played my cards more conservatively this year. And I think number one, that was a factor to it. Like I progressively hunted my way in instead of just diving in on the best spots deep in the timber. But I hunted him on opener, saw the small group of bucks he was with, but I never saw him. And then hunted around the farm there, but it's pretty big. It's not just a big block. It's kind of spread out. It's connected in total, like it's continuous acreage, but spread out, So I hunted different areas of the farm. There was some other bigger bucks around there, but he was definitely the most consistent. So fast forward, it was, like I said, only my 6th set of the season on October 5th. And I had a cell cam up on top of this ridge, and the farmer this year had like a 12-acre, it was a cornfield on this ridge top. It was super secluded. It was like the perfect situation. And one of my cell cams went off, and it was hanger right before daylight in the morning, working this scrape in a field edge. And on top of that, where that scrape is like the only entrance to a ridge point where they bed. It's like a primary bedding area. And for the whole length of this, that's the only opening. So it's like a no-brainer that this is where the deer are going to come through, and there's a scrape right there. So my cell cam number one told me he was in there that morning right before daylight. And on top of that, with the camera facing out into the field, I could see that the farmer just cut that cornfield that day. And because it's all silage, they cut it way early compared to, a lot of other corn doesn't come out till sometime in November. So he cut it on like the 4th of October, and I decided to go slide in there. And that was that night. And I got in there, and it was a pretty quiet. I didn't see anything that evening until about 45 minutes before dark. I looked in the opposite corner of the field, which is like 120 yards away. And sure enough, he stepped out on the far end, and he was with a bachelor group of 2 other small, like 1.5-year-old bucks. And he fed around on that fresh cut corn, but he was working my way pretty quick. Like he covered 120 yards, dude, in like 5-6 minutes. He was moving my way pretty quick. And I ended up getting him. And this was my first, like, I was pretty set on getting a kill on video this year with like my DSLR, not just a Tacticam, So I had my DSLR set up, and I filmed him coming all the way in, and he ended up working into. It was kind of tough, man. I would say I made a controversial shot on him, because what happened there was he came into like 20 yards, and mind you, there was 2 other bucks right there. So like getting picked off definitely could have happened. I was only like 12 feet above him in the tree. And he was at 20 yards, and I drew, and right as I drew, he started walking again, and he was in frame and everything. It was perfect. And I was drawn, and he was walking, and then he turned straight at me. And I was drawn for so long, like I started to get a little shaky with it, and he was facing me, and his head was down feeding, and I could so definitively see the crease between his shoulder blades that I was confident in it with my shot angle, and him only being like 15 yards away. I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna slide one between his shoulder blades. And dude, that's what I did. He was head down feeding straight at me. And that's, less than ideal, but I ended up shooting him right in between the shoulder blades, and he took off, and he only went like 70 yards and tipped over in the field. And the other 2, the smaller bucks, dude, ran out to like 200 yards, and they're looking back at the big one, didn't know what the hell was going on. And they ended up doing a full loop and walking right under my stand. So that's how that played out.
Yeah, I remember on Instagram you were saying he's in the field, and then 10 minutes later you're like, he's down. I'm like, hell yeah, dude. I love watching those stories, man.
Yeah, it's fun it's pretty fun to not only to share with other people, but I like to go back on that stuff, and be able to relive it. And like over time you forget details of it, but I think if you document it along the way, it's pretty fun to go back on.
Yeah, easier to remember.
Yeah.
So that now what is Wisconsin a 1 buck state or 2?
I know. So how that works is you can shoot one with a bow, and then you can buy a rifle tag as well.
Okay.
So I don't really have much of an interest to rifle hunt in Wisconsin, because my family's big into deer hunting themselves, and I'd rather deer hunt if I do choose to gun hunt or whatnot in that time of the season. I'll just hunt northern Minnesota with my family up there or something like that. Yeah. But yeah,
so you're essentially bucked out with a bow in Wisconsin now, and then you're heading to Minnesota, correct? That's where your second buck was?
Yeah, man. And I'll notion that by saying, like, truthfully, if I had to pin one thing to it that I think made the biggest difference in my success this year that allowed me to harvest $3. And this frustrated me the most, man, because you hear people say it so much. And my background before I decided to pursue a career in real estate was I was an industrial maintenance engineer, and I worked a super typical, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and took all my time off in the rut and did that song and dance. But what, in my opinion, like what allowed me to have this success this year was the fact that when I went the entrepreneurial route of pursuing a career in real estate, I can make my own schedule. And I only hunted the days that I thought I hunted before the fronts and after the fronts. And, really being able to pick my hunts and my time to work around my schedule. And, I didn't have to stick to something. So, the corporate America lifestyle, man, hunting those fronts and just passing up the 70, 80 degree days and no wind, that bullshit, dude. I hunted less and honestly killed more. I think that was the biggest addition that I can say happened to me this year. So because to put it in perspective, the buck I shot in Wisconsin on the 6th, that was like a Tuesday. And then the one I shot in Minnesota, that was on like a Wednesday. I would have never even been able to do that, So, being able to make my own schedule was freaking awesome. So fast forwarding that into Minnesota, my intention really is because I just enjoy deer hunting northern Minnesota with my family and everything. We got a cabin, and it's like guys being dudes. My uncle, my dad, we're all grinders and we're into it. And my 40 acres cabin, it butts up to thousands and thousands of acres of public. And honestly, a lot of the times in the past, I would rifle hunt that in northern Minnesota, and that was just our heritage, and that's what I originally grew up doing. But in the recent past 5 or so years, I picked up a bow, and it's just so much more of a thrill when you got them within 30 yards, So I've kind of escalated that route. And then I don't mean to open that controversial topic, but I've found so much more success, man, coming down and hunting farm country and the bluffs and that sort of area down south compared to northern Minnesota, where it's all just vast forest and that sort. I found a lot of success up there and shot some great bucks, but like my effort invested to the return, man, it's way better down south. So yeah, I just decided going into you want the Minnesota part?
Yeah.
Minnesota
Go into the second buck. Yeah.
All right, buck number 2, and correction on that, it was actually October 20th that I got that one. But that day, what was going on there is it'd been raining off and on all day, kind of drizzling here and there. And I decided to, for about the last 2 or 3 years, I've scouted like in the off season. I put a lot of scouting time into southern Minnesota, and dude, there are some, oh my God, dude, there are some slammers in southern Minnesota. What I've done is in the off season, I'll go scout it right away in the spring, or if I filled my tag, I put a lot of time in like late November around Thanksgiving, and I just scouted out the sign that I found in southern Minnesota on the public. And these last 2 years, I've ran a lot of soaker cams down there, and the areas that I had a lot of faith in, I just run a camera all season there, and then come pick it up post season and kind of get that intel for years to come. And from what I've seen, with those soaker cams and the sign and that sort, I definitely had faith in hunting southern Minnesota there. And dude, this buck that I killed in southern Minnesota, it was definitely mature. It was like 190 pounds dressed, and it was a Pulpin Young 8-point. Dude, I killed this deer this year off one day of scouting in the spring, essentially. And it was I map scouted it, and I had a lot of faith in this one public piece. I wanted to kind of boots on the ground and see what it looked like. And I talked my girlfriend into, I pitched it to her like, hey, the bluffs down there, it's beautiful. You know, we can go hiking around. She doesn't have a care in the world for deer hunting, but she's into hiking and that sort of thing. I pitched to her like, hey, you know, we can go down to the public land. It's beautiful down there. We can go see the bluffs and that sort of thing. And dude, we went to this public piece and I scouted it, and it was tore up with sign this spring when I was there in like early April, I think. And I scouted this piece, and I kept in the back of my mind essentially because, dude, you know, coming and into spring, you have the whole October, November sign. There's rubs and scrapes everywhere. I was just trying to keep it in relation to where I thought these deer were bedding, because a lot of it is like vast open forest or you know, like hardwoods. And it's just, you know, walking through that, you might as well keep it at 100 miles an hour until you get into the cover. And I found a kind of a congregated piece of thick cover up in the hills. It was probably a mile into this public piece, and found huge rubs up on this ridge. And it was like a ravine essentially on the ridge. And down there, dude, compared to like when I was talking about the Wisconsin hills of being a couple hundred feet, no, man, in southern Minnesota, it's like, dude, bluffs. We're talking ridges. It's way bigger down there. And I found this one piece, or I found this one congregated area of thick cover. And when I was with my girlfriend down there in the spring, and I thought if the deer were on this public piece, this is where they're going to be. And then I dropped down off the ridge, and I found what I believe to be like, I thought if the deer were bedding here, and the first thing they did before dark is drop down and work to scrape, I found one that I assumed to be the primary in this area. Like there's clusters of half-hearted scrapes everywhere, but there's one that I found. It was a big, huge, wide open scrape. And I thought if there was bucks bedded up on this ridge, the first thing that they're going to hit before dark is this scrape, right? It was right at the base of the ridge. So I pinned all this out in the spring, and I thought, you know, I'm going to come back and hunt this in the fall. And fast forward to October 20th, and had a drizzling rain off and on all day. And then the bottom was going to fall out. It was going to get real cold come like after dark and into the next day. And it was a pretty high pressure day. So I got down there. I was a little bit behind schedule, but I had my mobile set on my back, and I scouted my way into this piece. And as soon as I dropped down off the ridge, the side, it looked just like in the spring, man. It was tore up already. And on October 20th, fresh sign, rubs, scrapes. I was like, yes, yes, dude. So I bumped one small deer as soon as I dropped down in the bottom. And I had to cross the river and go up onto the other side. Like I had a few hundred yards to go. And I was walking through some real dense cover. And mind you, I didn't get to, this is thousands of acres, and I only got one day of scouting on this. I took like a shortcut through there, and I was walking through some thick cover, and I was just a little bit behind schedule. So I was moving quicker than I would like to have, but I was walking through this thick cover that I hadn't walked through prior. And all of a sudden I walk into this, I find this opening, this like, I guess I'd call it like a John Eberhart situation where he talks about being right in a small natural opening. And I get into this, and there was a couple fresh rubs and 3 huge wide open scrapes. And I was kind of kicking myself because I was like, I was probably 300 yards short of where that primary scrape I was talking about. I was like 300 yards short of that still, but the sign looked so good there that it was like, had I not been so, I wasn't loud, but I also wasn't really sneaking in there. I thought if there was a buck bedded close to me, which there very well could have been, I was like, I probably ruined it. So I was kind of a little disappointed on that one, because had I not been so loud, I would have set up right there, dude. But I didn't because of the noise factor. So I pinned that, hung a camera there. Actually, I didn't anticipate, you never can count on a kill, right? So I was hanging some cameras, and I plan on coming back there again. and went in and I made my way to the spot that I intended on hunting. And when I was there in the spring, you know, there was that big primary, but there was a bunch of like small scrapes around it as well. And as I was scouting my way in there, I wasn't seeing those little scrapes, and I was starting to get a little nervous, but I was like, I got to go see if the one main one's opened up. And sure enough, man, I snuck into there, and that one primary was wide open. I was like, yes. So I at the time I didn't pick out a tree, or I didn't trim nothing. It's fairly open. It's not real open, but open enough in that bottom where I didn't have to trim anything out and that sort of thing. So I just picked kind of the only option I had of a tree. It was like a 12-inch diameter maple with very little cover on it. So what I did, I only went two sticks high, but I got custom aiders that I made. So with 2 sticks, I can get probably 10, 12 feet high. I was 2 sticks high, and I faced the stand straight away from the ridge and the scrape. So I was going to essentially use the tree as cover. And I had it quartered just enough to where I could lean around the tree and shoot. And yeah, I sat there. It was only like maybe 2 hours before dark. And I had a ton of faith in that, man. Like, it felt right. Like, I was sitting in that tree, like, just completely anticipating I was going to see something. And it was kind of a double-edged sword, dude, with the precipitation all day, because number one, it was good for me being able to sneak in there. Like, the whole ground was covered in maple leaves and oak leaves and that sort of thing. And I was able to sneak in there super quietly. But on the other end, like an hour before dark, this whole bottom is full of huge hardwoods, huge maples and oaks. Like, the one I was in was only 12 inches in diameter, but all the rest of them were 3 foot across, you know, big trees. And a full hour before dark, dude, this buck, I'd never heard him coming, and this buck pops out around one of these huge oak trees at 30 yards, walking right at me. Scared the hell out of me. It startled me enough to where I didn't even turn my Tacticam on. Like, I didn't think of it. I was just in the moment, grabbed my bow, and I stood up, and he walked right into that scrape. It was only like a 12-yard shot. And I shot him as soon as he was going head up into that licking branch. I shot him, and I hit him a little bit further back than ideally I would have, got him right behind the shoulder. And he ran like 80 yards, and he turned back, and he looked, and he didn't know what the hell was going on, and he kind of stumbled a little bit, and then he walked off into the cover. And I thought he would have tipped over, right out of sight. But I had my 2 buddies come down and give me a hand with that. And after it started pouring again, after dark, it was probably 6:30, it started pouring, and I got back to my truck and unloaded all my gear and that sort of thing, and waited for my buddies to get there. And we went in after this deer at like 9 p.m. And with the rain and everything, it took us some time to find this buck down in the bottom. And he ended up going out into this tall grass. It was like a weed field in the bottom, and it was almost like chest high grass. So, like, worst case scenario, because you could have walked right by him. But fortunately, we wandered around out in there enough and ended up stumbling upon him. And yeah, that was awesome. Honestly, like, the worst drag I've ever done, hands down. Like, with me and 2 other guys that are a lot bigger than I am, we left the truck to retrieve it at 9 p.m. and we got back at 4:30 in the morning. It was, dude, miserable. And that was my lesson learned, that down in the bluffs, or when you're that far back, we ended up, this 3rd buck I shot in North Dakota, we quartered it. I watched some videos online and learned how to do it that way. Got some bags and quartered it. And man, just me and my buddy were able to haul that out. And it was like 10 times easier. So I think that's kind of the route to go with that for sure. But Yeah, that was my harvest in Minnesota.
Badass, going in off of, previous scouting and, hanging hunting on a primary scrape when they're hot and smoke them on the first time in, man. And badass thing about that is you got you only hunted that one time, one spot. So you got that in the bank for the years to come as another spot to kind of slip into that time of year when, especially if that sign is still in there, another buck slipped in there. So,
yeah.
All right, let's get into your third and final buck. And this one's in North Dakota, right? You went all the way to North Dakota and killed the third one.
Yeah, man. So North Dakota was what I ended up doing, just because the Minnesota and North Dakota gun season opens up at like the same time, or at least it did this year. And I wanted to see my family, like the camaraderie for the gun season in Minnesota at my cabin is, that's some time that I want to spend with my family as well. So I already had my tag filled, and I just went and hunted with them the first 2 days of season. And I filmed sitting with my family. And then from there, we decided, I talked to one of my buddies to going over to hunt North Dakota with me. And their gun season just opened up at the same time. They're 2 days into it, but North Dakota is unique to where even if you're a resident, it's hard to get a gun tag in North Dakota. It's still a draw that's hard to be drawn for, unless, to my understanding, it's unless you own a certain amount of acreage, then you can get a rifle tag every year. But if you're just like a standard resident, it's still a draw. So the gun season isn't quite as frenzied as you would anticipate. And looking back on it, I think it actually worked in my favor. But either way, we ended up going to North Dakota on November 7th, and we got some groceries. And before we even went there, like my worry was because we were just camping our plan was to stay for 5 days or 6 days. I didn't want to leave all of our camping stuff on public land. So I called a guy, and I called a handful of people. Actually, I just found their information online, and I found a private land piece it was like 80 acres, and most of it was just field. But I found it had a little woodlot on it to protect us from the wind, because dude, the wind is brutal in North Dakota, and you need some sort of barrier for that. So this guy let me camp on his 80 acres there, and it was butted up to a bunch of public. And we ended up getting there at like probably noon or 1 o'clock on the 7th, set up camp. And then we were going to start scouting right away, because my buddy shot a big buck in North Dakota, but it was on a different public piece. Neither of us had been up to this area. And so we set up camp, and we scouted the rest of that first day. And trust me, like, I spent endless hours map scouting this, and kind of I narrowed it down from like 20 pins to like the 5 that I had the most faith in. So like the 5 that I would definitely want to go check out first. And I went to the number 1 spot first that first day. And it looked so good on a map that I thought it probably had already been hunted by other people, but went there anyway. And sure enough, it was tore up. It was full of rubs, scrapes, everything you want to see. And I wrote it off a little bit. Like, did I really just find the spot I need to be hunting the first place I scouted? Like, no way it can be this easy. There just must be a lot of deer around. So we used the rest of that day scouting on the 7th. And then come the 8th, the sunrise, like we were going to spend the full day scouting the next day as well, because we had 6 days to hunt. We're going to spend the full next day scouting. And the sun just started to poke over the horizon, and we got out of our tent, and it was probably 15 minutes into daylight. It wasn't even sunrise yet. And we had all of our gear on, and we were about to go. Me and my buddy were splitting up each time. Like, I was dropping him somewhere and I was going somewhere else. But we got out of our tent on the 8th, it would have been, and we saw bucks chasing a doe out in the 80-acre private field that we have access to right in front of us. It was like 300 yards away, but it was for sure like 3 bucks chasing a doe right out in front of us. And you couldn't it was too dark still. You couldn't distinguish exactly how big the rack was, but there was one buck out of the 3 that was big, like noticeably bigger than the rest, and a big dark cape, like very good chance it was a mature deer. So we're like, well, shit, what do we do? I am not versed in the ground game, not in my wheelhouse, but with the situation, there was fingers that jetted out, like drainages that jetted out into this ag field. It was a big, huge ag field, but there was fingers of cover that jetted out into the field. There were a couple like 150, 200 yards long. And then those drainages went into the main timber. And it was like the perfect situation because this one bigger deer ran all the other little ones off. We sat there and watched this play out for like 15, 20 minutes. And what ended up happening, it was he pushed all the other little bucks off and then herded that one doe into the end of the drainage, like out in the middle of nowhere in this field, in this point. And with the wind, it was perfect for us to circle around and have the wind right in our face and sneak up this drainage, knowing that this buck and the doe were bedded out in this finger. And honestly, I already had 2 bucks down, and I was kind of waiting for my buddy to take the opportunity. Like, we were both hemming and hawing, what should we do at camp? And he never pulled the trigger on it. So I was like, screw it, I'll go try it. And I went and did a big loop around so they wouldn't see me. And I got into that finger, dude. And it was only like, it started out, the finger itself was like 40 yards wide, and it eventually just narrowed down to like 20, 10, and then a point of nothing. And then it's the field. And out into the field, dude, it's just endless field. There was no cover if going westward, there was no cover. So it was like literally the perfect situation. Like if I was Jared Scheffler, I would have been just clicking my heels, but I was kind of like a fish out of water situation. I lost my visual on this thing. I was very confident they were out there, but I just wasn't 100% on it, and I ended up circling way around, and I snuck into this finger, and I got probably, if I would say it was like 200 yards long, the finger was, I was like 125 or 130 yards into it, and I hadn't seen the deer yet. And so they had to be like right in front of me, but I was stood up against this tree, just kind of looking around, wasn't really sure what to do. And all of a sudden, like 40 yards in front of me, I don't know, she must have been bedded. This doe picked me off and like took a couple steps out in the field and already had me pinned. And she ran out the other side, and dude, an absolute giant. I never got to see the rack when he was first chasing around, but this time I was only 40 yards away. Dude, she went running out into this wide open field, and an absolute giant went trailing right behind her, and they ran off into the main drainage of the timber, like 200 yards away, and disappeared. And that was our morning of the first full day. I just saw, like, honestly, one of the, top 5 biggest bucks I've ever seen while hunting. And yeah, in retrospect, I probably should have slowed down and, made that one count. But we spent the rest of the day scouting and found some more good looking sign. And what's super cool there is I've personally never seen elk sign before. I've never hunted anywhere that there was elk, but in this particular area, there's a herd of elk there as well. And dude, I was on the second day, I went in and scouted a portion of this, and up there, it's like a monoculture of oaks, and the understory is miserable, dude. Like so thick with like invasive species of brush underneath that it's like impenetrable. And these deer actually travel a lot of the old, and I just found this off the cuff while I was scouting, but these deer will travel these old grown in 4-wheeler trails and that sort of thing. Like most of them aren't even used anymore, but they're just open enough to where the deer can travel them way easier than this thick, nasty cover underneath. So it kind of narrowed them down, like, and you could distinguish their trails easier. And on the second day, I ended up coming down and I found this little grove of pines, and it was like an open swale of grass, like a CRP field essentially. But there was a grove of pines in there, and there was rubs from these elk that started at like my head height and went up like 8 feet high. And looking at those, it was like, oh my God. Like I've never seen anything like it. I definitely see why people are into elk hunting now. Like that would be intense to do with a bow for sure. But it was super cool because those same pine trees that were tore up with rubs from the elk, those same trees had hanging down boughs, and there's scrapes from whitetails on the same tree. Super cool. But spent the rest of the day scouting on the 8th, my buddy and I. And unfortunately, what was supposed to happen the next day was supposed to be like the perfect weather front, just a falling out, and there's going to be like a 10-15 degree drop, but no precipitation is what it originally said. But then once we, like the day before, it switched, and all of a sudden it says, oh, we're going to get 8 inches of snow in one day. And up there, it's just, we were in no way prepared for that. And on top of that, like, everything is minimum maintenance roads up there. It would have been a shit show if we would have stuck around. So, like, unfortunately, our 6-day trip all of a sudden gets cut into 3. We had the next day, so it would have been the 9th to hunt. And we're gonna pack up camp, unfortunately, and cut it short. Oh yeah, that night a vehicle issue, like my Jeep partially broke on me. So less than ideal. But so we decided to hunt that one day. We had one full day to hunt, and based upon our day and a half of scouting, we just decided to both go to the best sign or the best situation that we found. And the very first place I scouted was the best sign I found. And I went in there and decided I was just going to sit there all day because, what do you got to lose? You got one full day to hunt here. And that was the best spot. And I set up on what I thought was a primary scrape. And, maybe it wasn't quite as relevant being, 9th of November is more of a chasing phase. But on top of that, it's kind of a pinch point in the ridge. And there it's huge elevation change, but they're ravines, not ridge tops, So I ended up going and setting up in this bottom where I scouted on the first day, and it was pretty eventful. Like right off the rip, when I was setting up, I had a deer walk in, and then I had small bucks and does kind of chasing all morning. It was pretty cool. But about 11 o'clock that day, I grunted in a small 6-pointer. That was pretty cool. He walked right under my tree. And from 11 o'clock until 4 p.m., I didn't see anything. It was just dead in the middle of the day. And about 4 o'clock, the wind died down a bit, and it was pretty quiet in that bottom. I think my thermals were just rising because at 4 o'clock, I saw movement up on the hill kind of. And all of a sudden, like a commotion of deer broke out, and 4 does ran down and stopped right in front of me. And unfortunately, one of the does picked me off right away, and she was not about it. She kind of head bobbed me for 10 minutes, and the other 3 does were walking around in front of me. So I had like 4 deer within 40 yards of me, all 4 does, and they kept looking back, and I didn't know. I was wondering what had bumped them because they had been standing there for like 10 minutes now. And I was sitting there with my bow in my hand, and it was, like I said, it was pretty quiet in that bottom. I was sitting there just waiting, looking at these does, and they were looking at me, so I could like hardly move. And then back off to the left, I could just hear like the indespicable step, 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 step. And it was like, oh man. So I slowly peek my head around while these does are all right here and already alert, and this 8-pointer that I ended up shooting, he's just slow stepping, coming right in after these does. And he walks into like 15 yards and he locks up and picks me off in the tree. And I couldn't move. He was locked onto me. The other does were sketched out. And I didn't think that I definitely didn't think I was going to be able to pull this off, because I thought as soon as I tried to draw, those does were going to blow out of there. But somehow the buck turned around and he was like stepping out to leave. And I drew back and squeezed off a shot through a nice little opening that I had, and hit him quartered away, went up into his vitals, and he ran off about, I don't know, he made it like 80 yards and tipped over. So I wasn't sure on that, and I never really liked it. I don't even go grab my arrow, honestly. I think I'm just nervous to bump them if they're bedded close to me. So I always, like, unless I see him tip over in sight, which never happens to me with a bow, I always just pack up and get out of there and give them a couple hours no matter what. And came back with my buddy a few hours later, and we couldn't find any blood. And I was confident because the ridge is so steep where he ran to. I was like, if I hit this thing vital, he wasn't going to go up that hill. So we just ended up going to the base of the ridge and walking the edge of the ridge and walked right up on him. So that was my third buck for the year.
Nice, man. It's an incredible season. You were all over the deer, and it seems like you were just going where your best odds were. And like you said, you weren't hunting kind of the bullshit days and hunting the prime days, and it really paid off for you. And I think that's the big takeaway for me on this podcast is, you kind of have the flexibility to hunt those best days, but if a guy's trying to, pick and choose his days, maybe he's got kids or he's trying to pick and choose his days with his wife, those best weather days you need to be there for those. And then the other days you can kind of be like, hey, I'm going to stay home tonight, but in 2 days I'm going to go out, kind of wheel and deal. So that might be something that I'm going to really try to focus on. Cause a lot of times you're like, man, I just want to get out there. I just want to get out there. And you're probably wasting time on those not as good days when you could be scouting. It seems like you're using the not as good days to scout, and then you had the weather front coming in. Now you're going to hunt. So I think that's the key takeaway from this. Appreciate you coming on and telling your story, man. Absolute badass season. It's going to be a hard one to top.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That many different states and that many different bucks. Let the listeners know where they can, see the videos that you have and where they can follow you on social.
Well, I guess first I'll say if you're in the market to buy or sell residential real estate in Minnesota, get a hold of me at alex@moveminnesota.com. And you want to follow me on social media, my platform is on Instagram. You can follow my links from there, but my Instagram is deer_development. And that's it.
Nice, man. Well, appreciate you coming on and sharing the stories. I know the listeners are going to love. This is the time of year where you want to, reflect back on the seasons and see where, it seemed like scouting and picking the right days was the keys to the success this year. And then getting in there and setting up and going with your gut on where you wanted to set,
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, $3, 3 states, just wham, bam, bam. Like I said, I feel like a lot of this was hunting those prime days and all the scouting that he did before he was hunting to be successful. It was this absolute killer year. Killed 2 solid bucks with a bow, 1 with a rifle, 3 different states. I mean, that's hard year to beat for anybody. Like I said, he does run a pretty good Instagram page. You can follow him there. If you are from the Minnesota, Wisconsin area, a lot of related content. We have a lot of listeners from up there. Like always, we appreciate you guys listening all the way to the end. We love you guys. We're going to keep bringing the content to you. Hopefully, this is your best deer season ever, and you can have a season like Alex did this year. Like always, try to do the right thing. Try to leave a legacy, and Whitetail Legacy is out. Until next week when we're coming in your ear holes.